everyone, my name is Iasmina and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do another wrap-up, and that is, or recent reads, and that is all the books that I've read since my last recent reads. So I think we've got about 7 books this time. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get into some reviews of the last 7 books that I've read. So I'll start in chronological order from the last that I've read to the most recent. So the first book I have to talk about is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, and this is sort of a YA contemporary thriller. I was excited about this book because, as you know, I really loved The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is a thriller and about sort of a secret society. And this book was supposed to be kind of in the same vein. And after reading it, I can definitely see why that comparison is made. Long story short, I did not enjoy this book. I gave it 2 stars out of 5. I wouldn't say I would not recommend it because maybe this is exactly the kind of thing that you like. I know a lot of people actually really love this book and rate it highly, but to me it was mostly about the characters. I just did not like the people in this story whatsoever. And there is sort of a reveal at the end, which is fine. Plot-wise, you know, it was fine. I just didn't find myself enjoying reading it, and that's a big thing for me. I read for pleasure, I read because it's entertaining, and this to me was not entertaining. It was kind of a slog to go through, even though it's pretty short. It actually took me quite a long time to finish because I just didn't feel like picking it up, and that's, you know, that's a red flag for me in books. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's personal preference, and personally, I did not enjoy this book. But you know, if you have this on your bookshelf and you still have not read it, please don't let my review deter you from picking it up, because after all, reading is entirely subjective. So just because I didn't like it does not mean you will not. The next book I read after We Were Liars is the sequel to Every Heart a Doorway. So this is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. It's a series of fantasy novellas. This is the first book. I've talked about this a lot before on my channel. Recently I read actually the second and the third book. So the second book is Down Among the Sticks and Bones, and the third book is Beneath the Sugar Sky. I read them not chronologically, but I'll just talk about them together because that makes sense. So let's start with Down Among the Sticks and Bones. This follows, if you've read Every Heart a Doorway, I'm not gonna spoil anything. I'll try at least not to spoil anything. But this follows Jack and Jill, the 2 sister girls who are in the first book, Every Heart a Doorway. And this follows them as they go into their world. I really enjoy the writing in this series, and even though they're novellas, I never really feel like I'm missing anything. I never really feel like there could have been more to the story. It's just really well-rounded, and yeah, I really enjoy the writing. As for the story in the second one, it's so interesting to actually see the world that these kids have experienced. If you don't know, Every Heart a Doorway, the first book, is about a children's home for children who came back from magical worlds. So they have fallen through a wormhole or found that magical door that took them to a really magical world, and then somehow they found their way back to the real world. And obviously you can imagine that's kind of traumatizing, and these kids probably have a lot of things on their minds that makes life really difficult for them, and it makes it really hard to come back to the real world. In this case, the girls discover a chest of clothes in their caretaker's bedroom, and they open this chest of clothes, and it's actually a doorway to a magical world. And now this world is very bleak, very sinister, actually very creepy, which actually I think I read this around October time, around Halloween time, and it actually made for a really good spooky kind of reads because yeah, the world is not very nice. But as a whole, I very highly enjoyed this book. I definitely actually enjoyed it more than the first book, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. However, after I read the third book, Beneath the Sugar Sky, I definitely found this a lot more enjoyable, and I don't want to change my rating for the second one because it's still a really fantastic book, but I really love this one more. And it's funny because if you see a lot of opinions, it's actually the other way around. People really liked the second book, and then the third one they were left a bit disappointed. And again, I can see why. In comparison to this was a whole plot from beginning to end. And I feel like this was more of an exploration. I don't know how to explain. This was an adventure, okay. This was an adventure and I loved every second of it, and I can understand why some people might not have liked it as much, because there's a lot of stuff that happens and you don't really get a lot of world building around all the stuff that happens. But personally, especially because it's a novella, it was enough for me. I loved this so much. In this one we were introduced to a whole new cast of characters as well as some returning ones from the first and the second book. And in this book we get to see the world of confection, which is a magical, sugary world. Just imagine every single thing in this world is made of candy or baked goods or something like that. This is that world. But without spoiling too much, we don't only get to see confection in this particular book, we also get to see another magical world, and I love this so much. This is probably my favorite so far of the series, and I don't really care what other people say. I enjoyed every single second of it. I love the characters, I love the world building, I love that just the plot, it just felt like an adventure. It just had that sense of wondrous adventure, discovering a really crazy world or two. And yeah, loved every second of it. I adore this series, and I have one more book in this series that I've yet to read, so I'm very excited to move on to that. And yeah, I just can't recommend this series highly enough. It's so great. The next book I want to talk about is called One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus? Yeah, I'll just say that. And this is another YA contemporary thriller. This book is about a group of high schoolers who are all in detention together, and then one of them abruptly and very mysteriously dies. And then the investigation and the whole thing about trying to figure out who done it, and was it one of them and how, because we get all of their perspectives in this book. And yeah, I honestly didn't expect it to like it as much as I did. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars in the end. In the beginning, I didn't expect to like it quite as much, but then as the book went on and as we got to know the characters better, I actually ended up really liking the characters. I really enjoyed the perspectives of the two characters that kind of have a romance going on as well. They're called Brownon and Nate. Yeah, Nate was a really interesting character. So was Brownon, and honestly so were all of them. As you got to know them throughout the book, I really I ended up enjoying it a lot. Like I said, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I actually think this was a great combination of a YA contemporary and a thriller. I think we got everything we wanted in this, and there's actually a sequel to this, but I'm very curious to see what the sequel is about. But yeah, really enjoyed this. Would recommend if you're into thrillers and YA thrillers in particular. Really good. Then I read the first volume of a new manga, and that is Tokyo Ghoul Volume 1. Well, new manga for me, not new manga in general. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I can't really fault it too much, I suppose, because it is the first volume. It was a lot of setup and not much else. So this story follows a high schooler called Ken, who is a normal boy, but then he gets transformed into a ghoul, and these ghouls are creatures that terrify the citizens of Japan, and they kill and eat them because their only way to survive is to eat human flesh. And yeah, this guy gets transformed into a ghoul, and now he has to learn how to survive, how to get past the fact that he has to eat human flesh in order to survive. So yeah, really weird and twisted. Apart from him transforming into a ghoul and, you know, trying to get past this kind of stuff, there's not really much that happens. But again, it's the first volume, so I'm definitely going to continue with this series because I do think it's really interesting and it's well written, and the illustrations are also really good. But yeah, it's very gory, very twisted, but really entertaining in a weird way. So yeah, I'm excited to go on with the series, and I'll let you know more of my thoughts as I read more of the series, because in cases like this, the first book doesn't really tell me that much. The next book I read is called The Oyster Thief by Sonia Faruqi, and this is an adult fantasy novel following a underwater civilization, an underwater world, and following mermaids. Full disclosure, I was sent this book to read and review. I only accept books that I genuinely am interested in reading, and so all opinions are my own. So just putting it out there. Yeah, I was initially attracted to this because I had never read any story about mermaids, and I know there are quite a lot out there and there are quite a lot that are popular, but I just never got around to reading any of them. I have a lot of thoughts about this. Overall, I definitely enjoyed it. I think, to me, this kind of story, again, is new. I thought the world building surrounding that was really cool. You know, you could really tell that the author put a lot of thought into the world building and into every single little detail. I actually learned quite a lot of stuff that I didn't know about from this book, you know, about the ocean and about the creatures that live underneath. And yeah, I thought that aspect was really well done. So the story follows two characters. The girl is a mermaid. She's called Coraline, and she is, when we first meet her, her boyfriend asks her to marry him, and we get to see her family and how she's not really happy with her life necessarily. She's not even that happy to get married to this guy, but it's one of those societies where she has to get married until a certain age, otherwise she's considered a spinster. So Coraline's father, he is injured, his arm is missing because it was blasted off by a stick of dynamite that the evil guys in this book, the evil humans who run this corporation called Ocean Dominion, they put dynamite in the ocean to excavate jewels and precious stones and things like that. And now the second character, he's called Izar, and he actually works for the evil corporation Ocean Dominion, and he, when we first get to know him, he just finished work on this giant robot who can create fire underwater in order to help mine these precious stones. That's the initial setup, and then Izar, through some weird stuff that happens, gets transformed into a mermaid, and he meets Coraline when she's on her quest to find an elixir to help save her brother. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on in this book. It's also a very quest-like adventure type plot, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. One of my favorite things about this book is all of the merpeople, or most of merpeople, can have this animal companion that is called a muse. And these animals can talk, and they're pretty much characters in of themselves. And Coraline's muse is actually a big shark. And there's also a snail muse who's really sassy, and there's also a seahorse muse that go with Coraline on her adventure. So in the end, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. As much as I enjoy the world building and the sort of initial premise of the plot, I feel like a lot of the way the plot was solved, so all the different points of the plot, it felt very coincidental, and it felt very sort of handed to the characters. And I also felt like some of the dialogue was a bit stilted and felt unnatural, felt like it was written just because it needed to tie up, you know, a loose plot. And especially at the end, I felt that a lot, that characters just said things because it had to tie up the plot with a nice little bow. And it just felt, yeah, it felt very unnatural, it felt forced, and it stood out to me, and I didn't like it. So yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it, and I would definitely recommend reading it. If you like this kind of premise, if you like stories set in the underwater world and stories about mermaids, I think this is a really good one. Okay, and the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video is Upside Down, and it's called A History of Dragons, A Memory by Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. So this was awesome. This is a fantasy of manners type story about a Victorian society where there are dragons, and the main character, she from a young age is obsessed with natural history and with dragons, and she really wants to study them. But because this is inspired by the sort of Victorian era, you know, that kind of thing was not acceptable for a young lady of her position to be a scholar. And so it's a lot about her fighting against that societal construct that women can't be scholars. And her husband and another scholar, they go on an expedition to learn more about a specific species of dragons. She goes as a sort of secretary and to sketch down images of the dragons and all the stuff that they find. And yeah, they get to see and study dragons. The writing was so good and so funny as well. And the character is awesome. I love Lady Trent. It's kind of like her memoir. She's writing about her youth, and there's 5 books in this series, I'm pretty sure. This is the first one, obviously. So in this first book, she's basically recounting her younger years, how she became interested in natural history and in dragons, and then how she had her first ever expedition where she went to learn more about dragons and what the things that she discovered there. And yeah, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but I love this. It was fantastic. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. In the end, I felt like the plot was a little bit lacking. I feel like I wanted a bit more in the end. But yeah, everything else I loved, and I am so excited to continue on with the series and read more about Lady Trent because she's awesome. So I highly, highly recommend this book. So yeah, these are the 7 books I've read recently and my thoughts on each of them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you've read any of these and what your opinions are on them, or let me know if any of them sound particularly interesting to you and you might want to pick them up soon. I'll obviously leave links to all of these books down in the description below in case you're interested. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next Monday with a new video. Bye!